Hey there, thanks for listening to the Nikhil Hogan Show, the show dedicated to bringing you, the listener, deep, insightful music conversations with the world's best musicians and artists. If you like the work that I do, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. I'm also writing a book, Why Children Quit Music, a book on music education that hopes to repair the devastating 90% dropout rate of children and music by changing and reforming the narrative around the current system of music education. You can go to my website at nikhilhogan.com to sign up to my email list for updates on the book. Now, let's get to the show. On today's show, I'm so excited to talk to 6-time Grammy winner and 2-time Oscar nominee, composer, arranger, and producer Jorge Calandrelli. We get into his development as a musician, how he learned to compose and arrange. We talk about his work with Tony Bennett, Yo-Yo Ma, Arturo Sandoval, and much, much more. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Nikhil Hogan Show. Hey everyone, so glad to have you back to today's episode of The Nikhil Hogan Show, the best music interview show around, interviewing the world's best musicians. Now today I'm absolutely thrilled to be introducing my guest, 6-time Grammy winner, 28-time Grammy nominee, 2-time Oscar nominee, composer, arranger, and producer Jorge Calandrelli. Incredibly prolific, Calandrelli has arranged, produced, and composed for artists such as Tony Bennett, Lady Gaga, Celine Dion, Madonna, Yo-Yo Ma, Elton John, Michael Bublé, Quincy Jones, Sting, Paul McCartney, Shakira, to name a few. Particularly his celebrated 30-year association with Tony Bennett has yielded 13 albums, 6 Grammy nominations, and 2 Grammy Awards. As both composer and orchestrator, Calandrelli has been involved in films and television. His most recent TV score, The Rain, co-composed with Kuni Murai, a 4-hour docudrama, premiered in 2010 for Japan Television. Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple, The Billionaire Boys Club, Tron, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, Sola, The Great Mouse Detective, and I'll Be Home for Christmas. ASMAC, the American Society for Music Arrangers and Composers, honored Calandrelli with the 2014 Golden Score Award for arranging, the highest award that could be given to an arranger in the USA. Jorge, it's a great honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Nick. It's my pleasure.
Now, I want to start right at the beginning. You've said that you've started playing the piano at the age of 4 by ear. Quick question, do you have perfect pitch?
No, I don't have perfect pitch. Thank God, because apparently I have some friends that do have perfect pitch, and they suffer enormously many times. Like if they have a piano that is perfectly tuned, but it's a little low from the universal A, they hear it all out of tune. In my case, if the piano is tuned by itself, I don't care if it's a little higher or lower. Like in London, they usually tune the piano to 444 or 443 instead of 440, which is the United States. So people with a perfect pitch suffer when they go to London.
So at the age of 4, you just were picking up melodies. You have good relative pitch, so you were picking up things by ear and just picking them out on the piano. And this went on for a couple of years. So you just naturally went to the piano. Did anybody tell you to go to the piano?
Well, you know what? In my family, it was a very, very cultured family in the sense that my father was a physician, and he loved music and loved literature and arts and everything. And my mother was a wonderful, although she was not a professional, she was a wonderful classical pianist. And she would play Debussy, Ravel since I was a kid. So I grew in a very musical environment. And we were 6 brothers and sisters. And my father always had for dinner people invited, like a philosopher, a mathematician, a historian, a painter, a sculptor, that kind of thing, because he loved that. And we had 2 grand pianos in my house that were back to back.
2 grand pianos. So, wow.
2 grand pianos, yeah, Steinway and a Blüthner. Old pianos, but they're beautiful. So since I was a kid, I could barely reach the keys, 4 years old. And I would be playing little things. And one day my grandfather says, "What are you playing? What is that?" I said, "Well, that's something I just invented." I didn't say compose. I didn't know what it was. I said, "You just invented." And it was a little valse kind of thing, melody with the chords and something. And my grandfather was impressed. He said, "You really do? Can you play it again?" He couldn't believe it. And that's the way the whole thing started. And since that moment on, I just kept playing and playing by ear. And you know what? As you were asking if I have perfect pitch, I have a very good relative pitch. I mean, like when many years after, when I went to some, courses in the University in Buenos Aires, and they would do that year training, starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chords, very dissonant chords. I would immediately say ta 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 all the notes. I can tell that. If they give me a reference A, I can tell you anything.
When you turned to the age of 8, you started having formal lessons, and you said your teacher started to teach you the classics, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and did you do Czerny and Hanon?
Not that much. Yeah, not that much. Not Bach, Beethoven, no. He was basically teaching me Czerny, Hanon, and maybe some Bach inventions we did. And very easy Mozart pieces. That was basically it, not more than that.
And how long did you have that teacher?
Well, I had that teacher for like 2-3 years. But the problem is I didn't respect him really musically because I didn't like the way he played the piano.
Right.
He would play Chopin. I put the pedal down, it was a mess. So I hated that. So therefore, if you don't respect your teacher, you cannot learn,
right?
So then that's why years after, when I started studying piano for real, I went to a wonderful teacher, Guillermo Iscla, which was from the Brandenburg School, and I really learned there. There I started playing Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and Ravel and everything.
How old were you when you studied with Guillermo Iscla?
Well, that's the thing. I started kind of late because after those elementary lessons I took like for 3 years or something, I took off on my own, playing by ear, and
right.
When I was 17, I was already playing professionally.
That's really amazing. So there's a big jump there from when you jump from your first teacher to playing in your own trio and touring Europe. So I'm kind of wondering, so how did you self-teach yourself? What records were you listening to?
First of all, when I started playing piano, I remember my first discovery was the Nat King Cole Trio. Okay, because my father brought from the States an album of Nat Cole with his trio. Nat Cole was a very good pianist. So I fell in love with Nat Cole, and from there on, then I discovered Errol Gardner and Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans, all those guys. I mean, the real good ones. So I started learning from modern jazz. I never really went to Dixieland or any of that stuff. My first thing was from modern jazz on, okay? So that's how I started playing. And then I started, playing with friends as I grew up, and we would do little groups that were not that great at that time, but that's the way I started playing, learning. In school, we had a little band. That was a disaster, but I played my music.
Now, did you have any mentors in your teenage years that you admired, or friends, older people who or professionals that you liked in Argentina?
No, not really, because my father actually, he played by ear, tangos and things like that by ear in the piano. And I had an uncle that was very, very good by ear, also played by ear, but very, very well. He was even a friend of Sola. So I admired my uncle, that was so good. But I never really had a chance to mingle with professional musicians until I was at least 17. That's where I started going to the world. And when I was 18, all of a sudden I became the pianist of one of the most famous bolero singers in Argentina who was called Roberto Llanes. And because Roberto was very musical, and boleros are a style of music that it's kind of like the jazz ballads, like the same kind of harmonies of tenderly and, or those standards. It's like the American standards of Latin America. And he loved the way I played. I mean, I was 17, 18 years old. He said, I want you to be my pianist. I said, you're kidding me. And
that's amazing.
I didn't even read music very, very well at that time. He said, I don't care. And we rehearsed, and all of a sudden I started playing with Roberto Llanes in Buenos Aires in very important clubs and concerts. So all of a sudden I was a professional musician, at 17 or 18. That's why I started so young, And I was playing really well at that time. I mean.
Now, you brought up your dad. Is it true that every Saturday he would make you and your brother sit and listen to Richard Wagner for long stretches in an attempt to culture you because he was nervous that you loved jazz, and this resulted in you disliking Wagner for a long time before you eventually rediscovered him?
Exactly. And, my brother, too, loved jazz. And he was not a musician, but he had a very good musical ear, and he played guitar by ear very well. I mean, so like kind of bossa nova chords and stuff. So my father was really nervous about our musical, perverse musical tendencies. And because, he was first of all, he was a classical music lover. He would even have, every year, I remember we had permanently a balcony in the Teatro Colón for the operas. That's why I never liked opera, because I had to go there since I was a kid. They would take me to see, and some operas it was not. If you like jazz, opera is a genre that is difficult to absorb, especially with the way they sing, and then operas can be very, very heavy for a kid, But I loved always. I loved Puccini. Puccini was my favorite composer. So when they did Tosca, then I was like, oh, please, I want to go, because that's what. But then, because he was a Wagnerian, he decided that to make us cultured people, me and my brother, which is a little older than me, he said, okay, you guys, we used to get a weekly, allowance. I don't remember at that time. I think it was to 1 peso or something like that.
Okay.
With 1 peso, you could do so many things. We could go to the cinema that cost 25 cents. We can go have a pizza, or whatever,
wow.
for another 25 cents, and buy Coca-Cola. With $1, 1 peso, at that time in Argentina, you could do the whole day doing things. So he would give us 1 peso every Saturday. But then before that, he decided, okay, you know what, from now on, before you get your allowance, you have to sit, and I'm going to play you 1 act of Wagner. And we were, no, Dad, come on, please, don't sit down. And so we had to sit there, and it was the Nibelung Ring and the Valkyrias and Tristan and Isolde. Oh my gosh! So I really didn't. I kind of I never liked Wagner until I was much older, when I kind of rediscovered him, because he's a great composer. One day I remember I went to a theater in Switzerland where they were playing, I think, Ravel, Daphne Krog, and they were playing The Rite of Spring of Stravinsky, which was one of my favorite pieces of all time. And then when I get to the theater, and that was a beautiful, like the Orchestra, La Suisse Romande, with Pierre Boulez or something like that. Very, very important, and a great theater in Geneva. So then what happened is that the moment I got there, I looked at the program, and I said, oh, no, it opened with the Meister Singers from Wagner. And I said to myself, oh, my God. Okay, so reluctantly I accepted. And then what happened was a miracle. The moment that the thing started playing, and those were one of the pieces that my dad used to impose to us,
Yep.
when the moment the thing started playing, I all of a sudden got the message of Wagner, and I started getting into it, and I loved it. And it was so impressive. You know, that's a great piece, the Meister Singers. And at the end, right after that came Ravel, which I thought it was going to be great, and it sounded kind of poor, almost, in comparison to Wagner. Can you believe that? So that changed all my perspective, and I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Of course, I love Daphne du Clos anyway, and Ravel, Debussy, and The Rite of Spring was spectacular. But the most impressive thing was that all of a sudden I discovered Wagner. At that time, I must have been 21 years old or something like that. So you see, in life, sometimes you've got to discover things on your own rather than do what your dad is telling you to do.
Now, you said you had a family of six siblings, is that right?
Yeah.
Now, you organized your brothers and sisters into a vocal quartet, and you learned to sing four-part arrangements.
I was the youngest of two brothers and four sisters, okay? So I was the youngest of all, can you believe that? And they're all well and living and healthy, thank God, today, no? Anyway, so that was a big family. But it was very interesting because my dad also, when a famous tenor, classical tenor or something would arrive and play in Teatro Colón, he would invite him at home for a dinner. And same thing, I remember a very famous cellist. I think it was Piatigorsky. He invited home. So he would do those musical things on Sundays usually. And and we had, very important musicians coming to the house. The funny thing is that he didn't want me to be a musician. That was the main issue. He wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor or any, like he would say, any serious, in quotes, serious profession. Not musicians were not considered serious. And one day, actually, one of those dinners, a very famous Argentine composer, Carlos López Buchardo, came to dinner, and after dinner, my dad said, hey, I was already probably 16 or something. He says, hey, play that little thing you composed the other day, that little thing, And I sat at the piano, I played something I had composed that was really contemporary and amazing, and the harmonies, and López Buchardo was shocked. He couldn't believe it. He says, my God. He said, can you play it again? Because he couldn't believe that I was doing that. He says, did you compose that? I said, yeah. Did you write it down? No. I said, I don't write music. I just played it. I remember it. So he had me play it again a couple of times. And then after that, he said to my dad, well, listen, your son has to come on Monday to the Conservatoire because I want to give him a grant for life. I mean, he has a talent that I haven't seen in He went on and on. My dad said, you know what, Carlos, thank you so much, but I want Jorge to be a musician. I want him to be an architect or engineer or something. So he didn't give me, and they were he was offering me a grant for free to study. So I didn't go to the Conservatoire. That's why when I really decided I realized that I wanted to be a good musician, and after Piazzolla, but that's another story. But that's why when I was about 22 and I came back from Europe, there's where I started seriously studying. And then I studied, I was like 32 for 10 years, and I studied everything I hadn't studied before. Everything, piano, composition, counterpoint, fugue, form, composition, etc.
Jorge, was the first book that you read on music, was that Russell Garcia's book on arranging?
Yeah, well, that was when I was in Europe, when I was already working in Europe professionally with my quintet. It came to my hand. I bought I remember in Maison Genève, which is a music house in Switzerland. I bought the book of Composing and Arranging by Russell Garcia, and amazingly, it's a fabulous book. Until today, for me, it's probably the best book ever written It's to such an extent that I learned how to arrange with that book before even studying everything I was telling you about. And I did my first arrangement for the radio in Switzerland without having ever studied anything but the book, with that book, and of course the coaching of the music director of the orchestra of the radio Genève. It was called a wonderful musician called Tony Bennett. He coached me. He says, "I want you to write the arrangement," because he had heard my band and he loved it. So anyway, he coached me until finally he said, "Okay, now you're ready." And when I heard it for the first time, I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was such an impression that very second, I decided that that's what I wanted to be, an arranger for the rest of the time.
Can I ask you a question? Did you said you were very good at using your ear, but were you also a good sight reader by that time?
No, absolutely not at that time. Sight reading is it's kind of a gift in a way, because in all my career, I've recorded with the best studio musicians ever in the world. There's not that many pianists that can really sight read perfectly. Like you put something that they've never seen and they would play it, not only with the right notes, but the right tempo, the right dynamics and everything. It's very difficult. There are very few. Like in Argentina, there were like two famous pianists that could do that, and maybe three or four, because one of my teachers, Gerardo Gandini, was famous for that. You would put anything in front of him, he would just play it perfectly, without any mistakes in the first reading. It was amazing. So there's not many people like that. And like even in Los Angeles, which is the site of the world, one of the most important places for studio musicians, there's not so many. Like Ralph Grierson was one of them. Maybe Mike Lang. And right now I'm working a lot with Christian Jacob, which is French. And he graduated with honors in the Conservatoire of Paris, and he plays jazz like fabulously and sight reads anything. You go in front of it perfectly. So he's one of those. So I wasn't none of that. I mean, I was not good reading and sight reading at all. But with the years, when I started studying piano, I worked on that, and I got to a point where I'm pretty good. But I'm not like a studio musician that just sit and concentrate and boom, play that. But I can read anything, no problem, nowadays.
Now, at age 22, you went back to Argentina and you met Astor Piazzolla, and he heard your trio.
Yeah.
And he was the one who told you to seriously study music. But your dad also told you to really study. Your dad told you that if you were going to be a musician, you better study everything in music from the beginning to the end and really master the craft. Yeah,
when he realized that I was really serious about it, and he saw how I was playing and everything. I remember when I was like 19 or something, one day I invited him to a concert where I was playing a jazz concert. I was playing with a quartet that was very much like a modern jazz quartet, no? We just played that kind of repertoire, on piano, bass, and drums. And he went to the concert. The concert was in the military circle, like in the military club. And he was a lieutenant colonel in the army, besides being a physician. And so he went in and was very impressed because what we were doing was very sophisticated and super well rehearsed. And it sounded incredible and people loved it. And so he realized at that point that I was serious about being a musician. So that's what he said to me, before I went to Europe. And he says, look, if you're going to be a musician, you better study everything from A to Z, everything that's in the book, everything. Otherwise, you'll end up being, like a cabaret piano player. That's not a good destiny. But if you become a serious musician, you'll have all my support. So that was the first thing. And then after that, when you told me that I met Piazzolla, what happened is I was playing at this beautiful club called 676, which is 676, in Buenos Aires, very elegant club. And the center star was the quintet of Astor Piazzolla. That was absolutely unbelievable. It sounded so, it was like incredible. I was playing there in the same club with my trio, playing jazz. But when we would play, people are talking, and when the Astor Piazzolla came there was this show, silence, lights, everything. And so Piazzolla one day came to me and said, "Hey, I love the way you play, man. I mean, those chords and incredible." He said, "Have you studied music?" I said, "No, not really. I play by ear." And he said, "You're kidding." He says, "You're kidding me, because you're playing is very, very, very complex." He says, "Let me ask you one thing." And he says, "You know what? You have to study music." That was like an order. And I said, "Really? What?" I said, "I'm 22 years old." He says, "Doesn't matter. I'm already 55 and I'm still studying," he said, or something like that, or 45, I don't remember his age. So anyway, at that point he said, "Well, listen, I'm going to call Guastavino, Carlos Guastavino, fantastic composer, which is a very, very talented composer from Argentina." And he said, "I'm going to call him so that you can start on Monday. You have to start taking lessons, private lessons with him." So to make a long story short, I met with Guastavino, who was an incredible musician and person. And I started studying. I studied with Guastavino for 2 years, harmony, counterpoint, and fugue. 2 years, classical harmony, counterpoint. And it was so important that is up until today that when I'm writing, I'm using the principles that Guastavino taught me at that time, believe it or not.
For the counterpoint and the harmony, what textbooks was he using, or what kind of method was he using?
But no method. He was just teaching me himself. He would give me the exercises. He was an amazing musician. First of all, he could sit in the piano and improvise in the Bach style. If you give him a theme, 5-6 notes, he would create a fugue as improvise the fugue in the moment.
That's incredible.
And he would be telling you, as he would play, he would tell you, "Now here comes here, and there's a basso continuo, and blah, blah, blah." He would explain the form of the fugue as he was playing, improvising. Now, he was a monster, you see.
Yeah, it's very rare to find musicians who can do that nowadays, especially improvise in the style of Baroque or any of the styles using the theory.
Very difficult. That's why he was amazing in that sense. He would, for instance, those old pieces that were, from the Baroque time, that they would have only one line in the bass, and then those chords that were like 6/4/3/2.
Oh, the third bass, the figured bass.
Exactly. And you would put one of those, and he would start playing in the backside perfectly, with the basso continuo. So that's why he would create the exercises for me. And he was such a human, amazing person and culture and everything that at the end of a lesson, he would say, "Okay, for the next time, these are the things, do this and that. And then he would say, "By the way, are you familiar with Gauguin?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've seen some things." He would go grab a book from he had a huge library, grab a book of Gauguin, give it to me, like Noah, for instance, give it to me and say, "Okay, for the next class, I want you to read this book and familiarize with this fantastic artist from the from the movement from Paris, blah, blah, blah." And he did that with Gauguin, Renoir, Monet, Manet, you name it.
That is a cultured man.
He loved, and then not only that, with books. Are you familiar with Kafka, Frank Kafka? No, not really. He says, "Okay, for next class, boom, he would give me The Castle of Kafka, things like that.
That is amazing. That's a real full teacher in every sense.
Exactly. He was like a Renaissance person, and his idea of being a good musician was not just being a good musician. It was you had to know everything else regarding the art. You had to read poetry, books, knowing art, and he helped me a lot, and I became a lover of all those arts after, with the years.
What did he think of your jazz playing? Because you were improvising yourself, listening to all the records.
The funny thing is that I was the student, and he was the teacher. I don't think he ever heard me play jazz. I don't think. I did actually once improvise some things, and he was impressed. Oh my gosh, you can improvise. I said, yeah, well, I play with my trio. I told him, and he never heard me play. He said, wow, sometimes happens, that you're teaching somebody, you know what they're doing.
Now, you also studied composition with composer Roberto Garcia Murillo, right? Could you talk about that experience?
Yeah, correct. Murillo was after I finished with studying 2 years with Guastavino, I went to Jacobo Fischer. That was a Jewish German exile that had escaped from Second World War. I was in Argentina. He was a very accomplished musician, and I studied altered harmony with him. The only thing, and that was kind of a nightmare because he was so German that he forced me to do things that I would have never ever done unless somebody would force me to do it. Like you would do a whole exercise of altered harmony, and once he said, okay, this is very good. Now, for the next class, transpose it half a step up, for instance. Oh my gosh, I said, you're kidding. No. So you have to do things that otherwise you would never do,
Right.
And that helped me a lot too, because when you do the professional work, you realize that sometimes you have to have an enormous amount of patience in order to do the job, whatever job is required at that time. So those things were all good. And after that, I went to Garcia Murillo, which is a fabulous composer. And with Garcia Murillo happened something funny. The same thing, he didn't know that I played the piano. He didn't know anything. At that time, I was already arranging and conducting professionally in Buenos Aires, And he didn't know that. He thought I was a student, like any other student. I was probably at that time maybe 26 or 27. And one day, I had an artist that was supposed to perform in this huge festival in Argentina. We had a full orchestra, with rhythm section, strings, big band, the whole thing. And it was like a pop contest, the OTI Festival. And there were a lot of artists from other countries that would come, and I was giving a guy from, I don't know, Venezuela or something like that. That was a pop singer, and I was supposed to write the arrangement. Different arrangers would write the arrangement and then conduct the show. And you know what happened? Since I had at that time for me to have a big orchestra like that, it was not a common thing. So I said, hey, I'm going to write something really beautiful. So the tune that I was supposed to arrange is very silly. I mean, the guy was not even a great singer. But we had this orchestra. So what I did, because of the title, I don't remember the title, was something about I see the sky in your eyes or something like that. So I said to him, look, I'm going to create an introduction that would set, the mood for your song. So I wrote an introduction that was kind of a completely Ravelian, with and the horns would come here and then the string and create a text. And then the guy came in. So I did that, and I didn't know that one of the judges for that festival was Garcia Murillo.
Your teacher.
So when he saw me, all of a sudden he sees his pupil conducting this incredible arrangement that sounded like Ravel. When I went to the next class, he says, wait a minute, was that you? I said, yeah, that was me. He says, you've got to be kidding me. You never told me that you're an incredible orchestrator, arranger. I mean, I can't believe. He says, from now on, we're going to completely change the approach, and I'm going to tell you what to do.
How did the lesson change? What happened?
Well, because then he started asking me much more than what he did before, because now he knew what I was capable of doing. So he didn't say, well, now I want you to orchestrate this in Scriabin style, that kind of a thing. That was different than before. So completely. So he took me to another level that was very good. And then my other teacher was Gerardo Gandini, that was the guy that I told you was an incredible sight reader, and he was an expert contemporary composer of contemporary music. He was the one that introduced me to that work, because at that time, after Bartok and Ravel, I didn't like even Schoenberg or Berg. They were, for me, they were too weird. And then he opened up a new world, because he started getting me into knowing real serious composers like Ligeti, Penderecki, Xenakis, blah blah blah, Stockhausen, And at that point, again, the thing expanded to another level. So anyway, that was basically, and by that time I was already almost 30, and I was already working full time as an arranger, conductor, composing also. I had already composed my first movie music in Argentina, so that was the way it worked. I mean,
could you talk about when you went to L.A. in 1968 and met Claire Fischer, and you said it changed your harmonic conception completely, and he said you heard him playing with the 6 saxophones, you were impressed by his harmonies, but you had been studying up to then. What was he doing that changed your concept?
Well, first of all, you know how I met Claire? I met Claire in Buenos Aires, like in 1967. That was a year before I came to Los Angeles for the first time. He went to Buenos Aires to do some concerts, and the manager, the promoter of his concert, was the same promoter of my concert. So one day she says, I'm bringing this guy from the States that is a fabulous musician and pianist, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you come to the rehearsal? You can listen to them. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, it must be a guy playing blues or something. When I went to the theater and heard Claire playing, it blew my mind in a way that you wouldn't believe it. So from that moment on, I stuck to him like I was his shadow. I went every day, saw him, picked him up at the hotel, take him here, there, and he kind of became my mentor. Even did a master class in my house, where I still had the 2 pianos. Did a master class for all the jazz musicians from Buenos Aires in my house, and then we recorded an album together at that time. It's called Fusión 2, means Fusion 2. And inside A was Claire Fischer, inside B was me with my trio and my quintet. So it was a very interesting, and I became real friends with him. So when I came to Los Angeles, I called him, and he invited me to Dantes, where he was playing with his big band, where he recorded an album that I remember called Tresaurus. You probably know about it. And gosh, that big band was incredible. He had 6 saxophones, as you said, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, and everybody, all the saxes, doubling woodwinds, and a fantastic rhythm section. His arrangements were unbelievable, because that was, and the guys that were there in that band were Count Candoli and all those, the super best players ever. And I could not believe that encounter with Claire in Los Angeles changed my life too. And then my harmonic concept, it changed also, because he opened up, even in that master class that he gave in my house, he showed how his voicings were so special, And from that moment on, I just kept following him, and then I had him play in some albums that I produced as pianist. Well, I hired him to play, and he was amazing. So I had a very nice relationship with Claire. And even now, before he passed away, he recorded an album of the music of Orlando Gelbar, my friend. And in that session, he also recorded one of my tunes, which is amazing, which is called, In 5. That was a tune that I had composed with Fernando, and Claire did an incredible version, So, that's why. And I also worked with him in some projects, even when we did Chanticleer, which is a vocal group from San Francisco, fantastic vocal group. We did an album that was called So Many Stars or something like that. And Claire was doing like 2 arrangements, and I was doing 2, and some of the guys from the Hylos, top vocal arrangement. Yeah, and there's where we had an opportunity to see each other again and be together, in a project with Claire.
Now let me switch over to your Concerto for Jazz, Clarinet, and Orchestra, which you said was a piece that opened many doors in your career.
Yeah.
One of the most important goals I had in writing my concerto was to be very honest in what I wrote and to pour all of my loves, passions, and influences from classical to jazz, which I had enjoyed and accumulated through my life into my writing. Some of the biggest influences for me have been Ravel, Stravinsky, Bartók, William Walton, Gil Evans, and Claire Fischer, but there have been others as well. Now talk about how old you were when you wrote that, how long it took you to write it. It is really a fantastic work.
Thank you.
And how just your whole approach to writing that.
Well, that was amazing because the way that started is because when I arranged for Eddie Daniels. Eddie was recording an album in New York, and he was doing it with a pop arranger. But all of a sudden, there was one tune that needed strings, and the producer of that album, that was Ettore Stratta, that was my very good friend. I worked a lot with him in my career. He recommended me to Eddie. He says, "No, yeah, Eddie, I want George to this arrangement, period." And Eddie said, "Well, then tell him to do like something, and come to my house and play it before we commit. I want to hear what he has to say." So I wrote my first arrangement for him. That was called "Forget the Woman," and I wrote a sketch of the arrangement in the piano, and went to Eddie's house. And Eddie said, "Okay, let's see what do you have." So I gave him the music. Eddie's a fabulous sight reader, fabulous. Gave him the clarinet part, and I sat at the piano. I said, "I'm going to do the orchestra." And it was a very intricate introduction, but I had to learn it because it was like. So I played the intro. Since I played the intro, he was already impressed. He says, "Oh my God, that's going to sound great with strings." And then he started playing. And he loved the chord changes and everything. And at the end of this, when he finished, he said, "Hey, George, man, love it." Gave me a hug and said to Ettore, "You got it. We'll do this with George." That was my first arrangement for Eddie Daniels. And that was my first Grammy nomination. Because that arrangement was the only one that got nominated in the album, Best Instrumental Arrangement. And one of the guys that had voted for that was in the committee of arrangers, was Jack Elliott. And Jack, I had the chance to meet Jack in Los Angeles, like a couple of years after that Grammy nomination. And when he knew that I was in town, he says, "Hey, I want to invite George for lunch and meet him." So we met with him in Beverly Hills. And Jack, at that point, said to me, "George, I liked so much what you wrote for Eddie that I was one of the ones that voted you for the Grammy so you could get your nomination. But I would like to ask you, would you like to write a concerto for Eddie, like a big piece, 3-movement piece or something like that, 20-some minutes?" I said, "Well, absolutely, I would love to." He says, "Okay, well, you know what? I'm at this moment officially I'm commissioning you to write it." Because he was the president of the New American Orchestra, and they would commission pieces to composers or especially arrangers. So he commissioned me the piece right there at that moment. And I remember at that time he said, "There's not a lot of money, but we'll pay you $3,500, I think it was, which at that time was not that bad. It was that was in 19. He commissioned me the piece in 1984.
Okay.
And so anyway, he gave me 1 year to write it and orchestrate.
That piece, I mean, it's really amazing. And Quincy Jones called you after hearing the concerto, and he said he loved it, and he wanted to get you involved in this Steven Spielberg movie, The Color Purple.
Absolutely. That was the reason for it. You know why he called me? Because Dave Grusin, which is a fantastic musician, as you probably know, I mean, you must know him. Dave was at the premiere of the concerto, and he loved it. And he was at that time one of the owners of GRP Records. So when he heard it, he decided that he wanted to record the piece in Eddie Daniels' album in London. So we recorded the Clarinet Concerto with the Philharmonia Orchestra in London, in Olympic Studios, fabulous. And then, right after that, I've decided to move to Los Angeles. So I came to Los Angeles, and I had just moved from New York. And, and I was sitting in boxes in my new house in Beverly Hills. Yeah. And wondering, well, what am I going to do? I don't know anybody here, so it's not easy. And all of a sudden, the phone rings. And when I pick up the phone, I say, who's this? He says, hi, is it George? Yeah, I'm Quincy Jones. I thought it was a friend joking. I say, come on, who's this? He says, no, George, I am Quincy Jones. And I was stayed in silence. I said, really? He says, yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'm calling you because Dave Grusin has strongly recommended you to be part of the movie The Color Purple that we're filming with Spielberg. We're going to have an 85-piece orchestra, but he explained. And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. And he says, are you available? I said, yeah, I am. And then he said, well, listen, I'm in a bungalow here in the Beverly Hills, in the Bel Air Hotel. We have a bungalow here. But you come right now, come and see me, and I'll explain everything. So that's the way it started. So I composed really two important cues in the movie. And Quincy took some credit on that too, because the main themes were his. But I wrote every single note of the whole thing. And we recorded it in MGM, and Spielberg loved it. When I finished the last chord of the separation, which is like a 6.5-minute cue, and it was like a piece of music, like a concert piece of music contemporary. He loved it so much that when I finished the last chord, he came out of the console, came up to the podium and gave me a hug in front of the orchestra. I said, George, welcome to Hollywood. That's history. Yeah, and after that, I get a call from a friend and says, George, congratulations. I said, for what? He says, you've been nominated for an Oscar. I said, come on, get out of here. I said, absolutely. Because I had gotten credit as composer at the end of the movie. No? Additional music composed by, and my name was there. And I got nominated for an Oscar. And then next thing that happens, I'm sitting in the Shrine Theater right next to Quincy and Spielberg and the other musicians that had participated at the Oscars, in a tuxedo. I mean, like a incredible dream. I never imagined that would ever happen.
Jorge, we're running out of time, so I obviously we have to ask you about Tony Bennett. I mean, you're known for your highly acclaimed, award-winning collaboration with that legendary singer, and there's a grand range of albums that you've worked on together. Let's talk particularly about a couple of them. So, the famous Duets album, 2006. Could you talk about your Grammy-winning arrangement for Once in My Life that was with Stevie Wonder?
Absolutely. That was amazing. The Duets album was incredible, an incredible experience, because I went to all the sessions with all these incredible artists, many of which I had already worked with, like Barbara and stuff. But I mean, in this case, that was the first time I ever worked with Stevie Wonder, and I wrote this arrangement that got me a Grammy. And I also got another Grammy with Queen Latifah in another duet of I think it was the second album. And, that did also that she sang fantastic. The whole experience of the Duets album were incredible. But the whole thing with Tony actually started in 1986. It was 40 years ago or more, 42 years ago. Because that's another story. That should be another 1-hour interview.
Yes,
but
please.
For now, I'm going to give you the bottom line. One of the first most important jobs I got when I came from Argentina. I came from Argentina in 1978, and in 1986, I was recording in London with Tony Bennett the album The Art of Excellence. And it was and he even recorded one of my songs called When Love Was All We Had, that I had composed in Argentina 10 years before with thinking, oh, that would be great for Tony Bennett, but never imagining that was going to happen. And all of a sudden, I find myself conducting this incredible orchestra in London. Tony in an acrylic booth, and with Ralph Sharon and the trio. And that was like, I was pinching myself, saying, is that true? What's happening here? and Tony liked it so much that from that moment on, I ended up doing 13 albums with him and conducting live in England, New York, Los Angeles, Washington, many places, conducting for him. And he's a wonderful musician, artist, and a friend. And my last job with him was about, I could say, a year and a half ago or something, very recently. Tony was turning 90 at that time, and we did the tour with Lady Gaga and him, and did the Royal Albert Hall, the Lincoln Center in New York, the Rita City Music Hall, Pantages Theater in Los Angeles, and Hollywood Bowl, etc., etc., you know. And that was a magnificent experience too. Very happy to have been part of that.
Can you describe your relationship with Tony? You guys have worked together for, like you've said, 40 years. Talk about your personal relationship with him.
Very good, very good. Tony, Tony loves art to start with. So he would like, when we were in New York, he would one day call me and say, hey, George, you know what? You want to go to the Frick collection? I want you to come. I want to show you some of my favorite paintings. I said, yeah, absolutely. So he would send me a limo, a stretch limo to pick me up, and we would go both to the Frick, you know. And the moment we arrived there to the Frick collection, the moment Tony entered the place, 2 seconds after, the curator of the museum was there. We welcomed him and doing a special, you know, like a special tour of the museum, showing each and one of the paintings and everything. So with Tony, we did that. He also, like, we were in Washington one day. He said, I want you to take you to the Library of Congress. So we ended up going to the Library of Congress with him. And we were, as soon as we arrived, there were those preppy guys, you know, in ties.
Yeah.
And they took us there through halls and halls. And then they said, Tony, what any painter you would like to see? He says, well, I love Cerulla. He likes it's a painter from Spain, Cerulla, that he loves. And he says, and I love, you know, Renoir, Manet, blah, blah, so the Impressionists from France. They took him there and they opened the thing and they had the originals of all those painters. And then he said, what about the maestro? He's a musician. And the guy said, absolutely. Would you, is there any favorite musician you would like to see the original score? I said, well, yeah, I love Stravinsky. I said, Stravinsky, Ravel, and Barber, Samuel Barber, American composer. They took me there, and all of a sudden the guy opens up, takes out a huge thing, and it was the manuscript, original manuscript score of the Rite of Spring written by Stravinsky. I almost fell in the floor. So you know why? Because they have everything in the Library of Congress. Is the most amazing place in the world, you know. So anyway, with Tony, we used to share that kind of adventures, and he's a real friend. You know, that they would call me and say, let's go to the pier and have a cocktail, you know, that kind of thing. Or, I need to take you to a very special restaurant, which is a restaurant that you have to have reservations made 6 months in advance. And that was Rio's, a restaurant that was in the upper west side of New York, almost like in Harlem, and where all the Italian mafia used to go. And he would go there, and they always had a table for him, of course. And people would start clapping. I mean, it was an amazing to be, you know, traveling with Tony everywhere was amazing. I mean, and he's a great guy.
Real quickly, George, another person that you've collaborated with is the celebrated cello virtuoso Yo-Yo Ma, and you've recorded.
Oh my God!
And you guys have had a great relationship and recorded I mean, there was the tango, the music of Astor Piazzolla in 1997, which won the Grammy for Best Classical Crossover. And then there was Obrigado Brazil.
Absolutely.
Just talk about your relationship with Yo-Yo Ma and just talk about your experience working with him.
But you know, Yo-Yo is not only a fantastic musician, but he's an adorable man, an adorable person. What happened with Yo-Yo Ma was that Sony Classical, at that moment, was the one that was handling him. They wanted to do some, because he was doing only classical music. They wanted to cross him over, do some. So there's where the first album we did, crossover. They called me to do a symphonic tango. Soul of the Tango.
Yeah, Soul of the Tango.
That was the tango, and that was the music of Astor Piazzolla. And that was such a successful album that album, which was in theory, I thought it was not in quotes commercial because it was very sophisticated, the music and everything, sold in Japan almost 1 million copies.
Wow!
I got here in my studio. I have a platinum cello that says for Jorge Calandrelli to commemorate the album of Yo-Yo Ma, Soul of the Tango, a double platinum for sales of more than 500 units in Japan.
Wow!
So in Japan only, at that point, that got almost to 800,000 something.
Amazing. Which
for an artist for a classical artist is an amazing amount of records. I think Yo-Yo, the most that had sold in his career had been like the Bach suites that sold over 100,000. And all of a sudden, this album, between everything past 1 million copies sold. Okay, so that's why. Then they commissioned me to do 2 other albums, which we did, Obrigado Brazil. I think those are the 2 I did. I did 3 or 2. I did 2, I think. Yeah, Obrigado Brazil and Soul of the Tango. And that was amazing.
Talk about your relationship with Yo-Yo.
So you know what? The beautiful thing about my relation with Yo-Yo Ma, the Yo-Yo, it's like in Buenos Aires when we were recording the basic tracks of the Soul of the Tango. We were staying at the Plaza Hotel, the Marriott Plaza, beautiful hotel. And one night, everybody wanted to invite him here and there. And one day he said to everybody, no, I'm tired. I'm just going to go to the hotel. I want to relax. And then when he gets to the hotel, he says, George, I'm telling you what, let's go have dinner, the 2 of us. So we had dinner at the Plaza, which has a beautiful restaurant. And he loved that Argentine wine called Catena Zapata.
Yeah.
So, which is it was at that time about $150 bottle. But it's a beautiful wine. And there we stayed there till 1 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
Chatting. And he told me the story of his life. I told him the story of my life. And we became real friends. Real friends from that moment on.
Now, the one last person I want to ask you about is that amazing album, A Time for Love, in 2010 with Arturo Sandoval. We got 2 Grammys, Producer of the Year, Best Instrumental Album at the Latin Grammys. Now, talk about that project, which really got a lot of critical acclaim and was very successful.
That was it was beautiful too. Arturo, I know Arturo for many years, and Arturo is a wonderful, wonderful musician. He was known first because of his playing, high notes, but he's a real sensitive player. He's a great jazz player. So when we did that album, A Time for Love is a Johnny Mandel song, by the way, right? And that was the title of the album. And he said to me, look, I want gorgeous ballads, and I don't want any flashy playing or anything. I want just that and gorgeous strings. So we did this beautiful album, and when we presented the album at the Latin Grammys, I never thought it would even be voted for anything because it was too sophisticated. They were all American jazz ballads, gorgeously played with strings and everything. So how would you imagine that? And all of a sudden, we could not only get nominated, but we went to Las Vegas. We won altogether like 5 Grammys because I got 2 Grammys as producer and arranger, and producer and
Best Instrumental,
arranger.
Yeah.
Best Instrumental, exactly. Best Instrumental, and Arturo got, of course, those 2 plus another one, and then Greg Field got another as a producer. and the engineer got enough. So altogether we get probably more than 6 or 7 Grammys. We never, ever expected that to happen, never. And it was a fantastic experience. We had such a great time in Las Vegas, with them. And of course, you imagine the amount of bottles of champagne that we celebrated with.
It's fantastic. Now, I guess to end off, I just want to ask you a couple of quick fun questions. Can you name me your top 3, this is just for fun, your top 3 classical composers?
Well, it's going to be redundant, but my 3 most favorite composers, I would say classical composers, are Stravinsky, 1, Ravel is 2, and I would say Debussy, 3. Those are my 3 most favorite composers.
Who are your favorite jazz pianists?
Well, very easy. Very easy. Bill Evans. Well, Bill Evans, I would say, there's so many. I'm trying to think of it. My favorites, yeah. Well, Oscar Peterson, of course. And Errol Garner, also, I would say. Those are my 3 favorites.
All right, you're a master arranger. Who are your top 3 favorite arrangers?
Well, Klaus Ogerman, Johnny Mandel, and Jeremy Lubbock. That's it. Right.
Top 3 contemporary composers.
Interesting. Top 3 contemporary composers. Well, I like... that's a difficult one, because like Penderecki is one of them. I think it's amazing, his music. I like Ligeti and Stockhausen, I would say.
Proudest musical moment, and you've had a lot.
Oh, top moments. I see what you mean. Well, it was, I think it would be probably, when I did the Color Purple, that came together with the Clarinet Concerto with Tony Bennett. That would be a highlight of an event that I can remember as amazing.
Top 3 singers that you've worked with.
Oh boy, people are gonna get jealous because I worked with so many good singers. That's difficult to say, but you know what? I gotta tell you the truth. For me, the 3 best singers could be Tony Bennett, Celine Dion, and Barbra Streisand. But there are so many others. I don't want to offend anybody because I worked with so fantastic singers. Everybody in their own style are great. Like from Johnny Mathis to you name it, Whitney Houston, and gosh, they're all fantastic. But the ones that I kind of probably had a more special thing was with Tony Bennett, Celine Dion, and Barbra Streisand. So, yeah.
What's the best way to get great ears? Well,
what I always recommend to the students and stuff is that they have to listen a lot and analyze everything. Automatically when I listen to any piece of music, I'm instantly analyzing. What chords are they using? What harmonies? If it's an orchestra, what colors? What instruments are playing? It's like constant analysis, like computer data.
Jorge, is there anything that stumps you, or can you actually kind of know everything that you hear? Are you able to analyze pretty much anything?
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, to a certain extent, of course. If you put a Penderecki piece, I will not be able to tell you how the cluster was done, but I can do something very similar. I can get very close to that. Like when I did The Shining, I had to use all those contemporary techniques. I had to do a crash course in contemporary music in order to be able to do that score.
What is the advice you can give for a young musician coming up?
That's a good one. Well, first advice, I would tell them that everything that they can learn in life, even besides music, it will be useful for their career. Like whatever, they have to read, they have to be educated, they have to have manners, they learn how to play games, like even chess or ping pong or tennis or golf. All of those things are very basic, they're tools for human relations, And they're very important in your career because everything you learn, and languages, they have to learn languages as much as they can. I speak kind of six, not perfect, but I speak six. They should learn as much as they can because that helps you enormously in your international career. And regarding music, my first advice is study, and study. That is the most important thing. And if you're playing an instrument like piano, practice a lot of sight reading. It's a very important tool too. Musicians that don't know how to read well, they never have a good career, usually, 99%. But if you're a good sight reader, you have many, many opportunities to do everything in your life, from playing in studio, rehearsing, anything. That funny, at the end of the book of Rosso Garcia, he gave a list of all the things that a musician could do, copying and this and rehearsing. And at the end of everything, it says, if you tried all of this and failed, you can always buy a monkey and an organ. I love that.
That's amazing that would be in the book.
It's in the book. That's just at the end of the book. It's brilliant. And that I had a chance to meet him in person because I was his fan number one. And he was Australian. I think, or New Zealand, Australian. And all of a sudden, a friend of mine said, you know what? Russell is coming to town, Los Angeles. He says, and he would like to meet you too, because I told him about you. Da, da, da. I said, oh my gosh, great. And you know what happened? He never made it because he fell sick and died. He was already he was in his 90s, mid-90s, something. So he never made it. So I lost the only chance I had to meet him in person because I was his fan number one. His book is brilliant. The Monkey and an Organ is amazing.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Jorge Calandrelli. What an honor to be able to speak to such a musical icon and legend. Thank you so much, Jorge, for taking the time. It's been such an honor, and I hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you so much, Rick. And listen, I've had the time of my life. I could have been another hour with you. But anyway, and please say I send all my support and my love to young musicians that are going to see our interview, okay? Big hug.
Thank you, Jorge. Have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to my interview with the legendary Jorge Calandrelli. What a remarkable musician and great guest. Hope you had a great time listening. Please support the show on social media and please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can also go to my website to sign up to the email list for updates on my upcoming book. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you at the next show.